big news out of Winnipeg and some special honors for some special people. You don't want to miss this week's episode of the Indy Ball Report podcast. All right, we are back again, episode number 211 of the Indy Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick, he's Will, and admittedly, it's a little later of a week this week.
It is, but you know what? To be honest with you, Nick, I think that we're almost kind of due for one, considering the fact that we have reviewed like every possible thing in existence from the past year, and we're making do with the off season, but you know. Unfortunately, back to the off-season grind as the weather starts to warm up a little bit.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's been getting the 50s around here, so that's a positive, certainly. And, I mean, we managed to get through nearly the whole off-season before we really got to really a light week. You know, I mean, what we have, like 2 or 3 others in the whole course of the off-season, and now we're about a month away from Atlantic League opening day. So we're about, 2-3 weeks away from doing that preview. So, I mean, all things considered, it really isn't that bad. Like,
no, it's not bad.
Exactly. So it's going to happen, and you just kind of got to run with it and roll with it, and that's what we're doing this week. So no promises on how long this episode's going to be. I can't imagine it'll be that long, but we're going to make do with what we have, and what we have is, a decent little bit of news out of the American Association and some stuff out of the Atlantic League, and then some other more, I guess, secondary leagues is one way of phrasing it for them. And we'll go through all of it. And we'll start with the American Association because they have a new preferred partner. I called it a partnership. It's really more or less that it's a preferred partner. It's wording difference, but in theory, it's basically the same thing, I suppose. Either way, it's with Paramount, not the big media company, not that Paramount. This is a different Paramount that works with mainly major events, sporting groups. They list the Power 5 NCAA conferences, done things with each of the major 4 leagues in North America, so NHL, MLB, NFL, and NBA. Done work with all of them, so certainly experience working with these larger groups. They've worked with them in the past. And what Paramount does is they help with brandings, graphics, event creation, facility openings, projects of that nature. That's kind of their shtick. They are kind of brand builders in a way. So they're now the preferred partner of the American Association. Admittedly, we normally wouldn't really spend much time on this just because, there's not really much there. But I suppose it is worthy of at least looking at this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that any time that a independent league can get any sort of assistance and whatever with people that their job is to build brands, I think that's a good thing. So I don't know, still 100% of like the thought process behind it, but I think that anytime that a league can, and not that the American Association has necessarily had this problem because they've been quite good at it, especially compared to the other Indy Ball leagues when it comes to growing their brand and expanding their footprint. And I'm not talking like physically. I think that anytime that a league can get any sort of assistance for that and partnership, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when it comes from a group that is as experienced as Paramount is. They also mentioned expansion in there, so I assume that kind of means they help with like the identity creation for something like, say, the Lake Country Dockhounds there. They help with building that out, which is nice to see also some variety. Normally in minor league sports, you see a lot of, as a Brandios, I believe is the company, that they normally do a lot of that work. So you have something where Paramount is helping with that. And realistically, if you look at the branding over the past couple of years with the American Association, and since really the rebrand, it's been very clean, very, I don't want to say professional looking, because that kind of demeans the league a little bit, especially in the past, but it looks very much like one of those major 4 leagues. It looks kind of just the way it should be. And that's one way of putting it, I guess. It looks in place with what you'd expect out of a professional sports league. They take it seriously. So that's definitely a positive, something I definitely like. And it seems like, the partnership or preferred partner has helped out a lot. And perhaps it's less of them doing work for the American Association and more or less like, hey, it's it's just something to co-brand with. It could even be something like that. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is a positive, I think. I don't think there's any way it could really be a negative. I mean, it's pretty much a middle of the road thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you're right when you say that. Again, the American Association, as I mentioned, has done a really good job with this, especially compared to the other Indy Ball leagues. So, would think that it would continue to grow and get better as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I have left before we move on to the next piece of news really is, you wonder if the Atlantic League's in need of a rebrand or something of that nature, because they're really the only ones that kind of kept that original logo. The Frontier Leagues moved on from theirs.
And next to like very few like original teams or teams that have been around for a while. Like the league is so different.
Exactly. Yeah. And it just feels like too. And like, I obviously have some nostalgia for the brand as it is, but you almost feel like it's time to refresh that logo because it's been around for about 25 years now. It kind of is like, okay, let's bring it into the 21st century. Let's get a little bit more modernized. You can keep some of the old elements there, and you can even use the current logo and maybe some throwback, or retro brands or promotions or things like that. But, it wouldn't hurt to have a new looking logo and brand, right?
Not at all. I think, in fact, I'd go further to say that it wouldn't hurt, and I'd honestly go as far as to say is that something that they should really look into and probably should do, just because I mean, there's one original team left. I think that it's got to move. It's got to become more modern for one. And I know we've said that a lot about them, but I think that it needs to become, the logo's got to become, I guess, more modernized, and just the branding in general has to get better. But I think, yes, it is definitely time for a change. Certainly we've seen like a lot of other leagues, like for example, like the Atlantic League still hasn't like done a remake of their website the way the American Association and the Frontier League has. It makes a difference. It makes a difference. So I think that's definitely something that they should look into and do.
Oh yeah, it definitely, yeah. The branding on the website and things like that, those are just kind of minor things that are, they're important, and it's something they just never really did. So, I don't want to rag on them too much. It really isn't an Atlantic League segment yet. So, but yeah, like that's definitely something there, which a fun little thing I noticed when I was going through and trying to find news for the week. Quebec redid their website. It's kind of nice now. I kind of like it.
Agree. I think that, again, it goes back to just making it easy to navigate as well. And the website itself looks a lot cleaner, a lot smoother, more organized too. So certainly.
Definitely. And so with that, we'll switch to the other piece of American Association news. It's more or less Winnipeg news, but it does involve one of the real greats of the American Association. And but essentially, Winnipeg announced that they were having their promotional schedule coming out, and there was one real major standout event on the calendar this year in Winnipeg, and that is on August 11th. Reggie Abercrombie will have his number 11 retired by the Gold Eyes. Abercrombie played in Winnipeg for about 6 seasons from 2014 to 2019. He is the team's all-time home run, RBI, and runs scored leader. In case you're wondering what those numbers are, it would be 92 home runs, 393 RBIs, and 371 runs scored. He's also the Atlantic League's games played leader, hits leader, home run leader, RBI leader, and runs scored leader. Those numbers, in case, again, you're wondering, are 781 games played, 936 hits, 146 home runs, 606 RBIs, and 563 runs scored, in case you're wondering about that. And the final real major accomplishment among the Reggie Abercrombie legacy in Winnipeg is he was part of the back-to-back championships they won in 2016 and 2017, a large chunk of that. And in case you wanted to attend, the first 1,000 fans in attendance get a bobblehead too. So that's obviously the important part of all of this is the bobblehead, not the fact that they're honoring one of the best players in franchise history. But, that's there too.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because Reggie Abercrombie was such a great player for Winnipeg for a few years, and of course Nick laid out those statistical accolades as well. But I think it's really cool, especially I think from in a time, I guess, with Winnipeg that I'll call it a lot of change. There's definitely a lot of change going through Winnipeg right now. Of course, Rick Forney's out there now. Greg Taggart's in. I think that it's important, especially at this time, to kind of honor your past, make a big deal about it as well, because Abercrombie certainly is deserving of that. And a jersey retirement ceremony, throwing in bobbleheads, you'd think that would certainly get people out to the ballpark in Winnipeg that night. And yeah, it just sounds like a really cool event. Well done. Well, actually, I won't say well done yet because it hasn't been done yet. But I think that it sounds like a really, really great idea that. And just a good way to honor, like you said, Nick, one of the greatest players in franchise history, probably the best. So, and jersey retirements, making sure nobody wears his number ever again, and you get a bunch of other promotional stuff too, like the bobbleheads is cool. So, I think that I think it's a cool idea. I hope it's well executed because certainly a guy like Reggie Abercrombie really really deserves it with the career he had there.
Yeah, absolutely. He deserve is definitely the right word to use. The guy did an awful lot for baseball in Winnipeg, and no one's going to question the accolades there and the honors that he gets. That much is for certain. The only thing I'm concerned about is I've seen these jersey retirements done before, and the one concern I always have is you can never guarantee an audience, and it's always awkward when there's not a huge crowd in attendance and they're doing it. I've seen two of these. One was in Sussex County. The other one was in New Jersey. Sussex County didn't announce it beforehand. They just kind of did it at the game when they knew there'd be a big attendance number. I believe it was a Saturday night game towards the end of the year. It's done very well. The flip side with New Jersey, they announced it in advance and there was nobody there. There was maybe a couple hundred people in the ballpark. It was for Isaac Pavlik, and it just felt very awkward. It felt very forced. It felt very uncomfortable because you'd have something that's clearly important to the guy. Then they put on a pretty decent, ceremony. They had the other guys who had the numbers retired. They brought out the guys that he played with, the whole nine. Very nicely done. It's just, there was maybe a couple hundred people in the ballpark, and it just felt so deflating that you have this guy who has like a pretty important moment for him doing all of this and making this speech and everything in front of a mostly empty ballpark. And it just felt really, I don't know. It didn't feel right. And that's the only concern I have. Now, I don't think that'll be an issue in Winnipeg. It seems like Winnipeg really does support baseball. Obviously, Shaw Park is considerably nicer than Yogi Berra Stadium as well, so that helps just on day-to-day attendance. That's obviously something that's got to be considered as well. And also, I think as far as just the culture in general, I think it'll work better, so that won't be as much of a concern. But it is still the one thing I'm worried about with the whole thing is that there's just not going to be enough people at the ballpark, and I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, and that that point of Isaac Pavlik's well taken as well, because a guy that gave so much to the Jackals, won a lot there, had great success in big games. Like, you want that guy to have a proper ceremony. The problem, of course, and listen, I think the important distinction to draw here is that Winnipeg is a great baseball market. When it comes to independent leagues, they have a great fan base, nice ballpark, all the whole 9 yards. And so I don't think that's going to be an issue in Winnipeg, especially for a player like Abercrombie, and I just think the Winnipeg, that that organization for one, and the fan base and everything surrounding it is just so much above like what the New Jersey Jackals were. It kind of feels weird saying when they were at Yogi Berra Stadium. That's kind of odd, but when they were, of course, at Yogi Berra. So I think that it's not something I think is going to be an issue, but certainly understand the point, because hey, in any sort of that is a risk when there's any sort of jersey retirements in independent league baseball. But you hope it's done right. Certainly putting it out how many months in advance? Like 5?
Like about 5 that, yeah.
About a little under 4, or like
about 4.5, yeah.
4.5 months advance. So I would think that it's going to be done well and done right, and I think Winnipeg will do him justice.
Yeah, I have no concerns about Winnipeg handling it, and I just hope the city shows up for him, the fans show up for him. That's certainly.
Although I do think the bobblehead aspect of it is really smart.
Yeah.
Because as much as like guys like baseball and independent league baseball nerds like Will Thompson and Nick Firestone might be excited for their jersey retirement of Reggie Abercrombie, I don't know about everybody else. But what they are excited for is bobblehead nights. So that way you can like if there's like a few hundred people at a bobblehead night, then something went terribly wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's very true there. So I mean, that is actually a fantastic point you make, where the bobblehead promotion brings in people in and of itself. So that is actually a fantastic point to make. That will definitely help. So, but yeah, so good for Reggie. Happy for him. With that, we will go over to the Atlantic League. They have their own way of honoring players, and that's their 25th anniversary team, their silver anniversary team. And last week we mentioned that one player came out. We didn't have the notes written, so we're just going to push them to the next week. So we have that player, and we also have the player that was announced on Thursday as well. So let's start with the guy from what would be about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, depending on when you're listening to this, with that being Jim Ed Warden. He is the 7th addition to the team. He is a relief pitcher, or was a relief pitcher. He spent his whole career with the Southern Maryland Blue Crabs. That is 2009 to 2014. He was a first-team postseason All-Star in 2010, 2011, and 2013, with just a regular All-Star in 13 and 14. He is second all-time in saves with 134 saves, 6th in appearances with 284, and he is the 6th man on the totem pole for all-time reliever ERA at a 2.77 ERA, and he had 252 strikeouts in just about 300 innings pitched, 298.2 to be exact. So, a solid relief pitcher, a guy that, quite frankly, I didn't even really know about, which is kind of weird because most of these other guys I've at least heard of or been fairly familiar with. This is one that I had not heard of, and he does seem like he's fitting, but he also seems like he's the weakest entry so far.
Yeah, but I mean, so like how many players is this, like 8 or 9 now, I think?
We're at 8 now.
8.
Once we talk about the next guy.
Yeah, so I think weakest entry, yeah, probably. I don't know, maybe Tim Kaine is in that as well, just because, he obviously his selection I think was more longevity based than
I suppose.
So I think that he might, while he is like, and to be honest with you, I honestly had never heard either. So, but then again, he did play a pretty long time ago. But hey, when you look at the numbers, like it makes sense because you can kind of put him on that pedestal with like a guy like John Hutton, for example, with Somerset, and I'm sure John Hutton will hear his name called on this team at some point. He has to, but I think when it comes to,
and if he doesn't,
he will. But I think Ed Warden is right in that conversation as well. Probably not John Hutton, but in that ballpark also. So I think it was good to see a guy like him honored, and I think I definitely do think it was. I wonder if the league's trying to like stagger like the no brainers I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of it too, because like the no-brainer ones are probably your more like, you're more well-known, you're more publicized guys, the guys that have a lot more fanfare around them. So do you really want to roll like Darryl Thompson, Lou Ford, and all of those guys like one after another, after another, after another? Or would you rather like go, okay, every like 4 or 5, we're going to drop one in there? Because really the closest to the no-brainers was Ray and Nettles as the 2.
Yeah, I think the next guy we're about to talk about is Glenn Murray too.
Glenn Murray too. Yeah, although he has a little bit less fanfare around him than the other 2.
He is the home run king, but I know what you mean though.
Yeah. Just wait, if Courtney Hawkins ever comes back from Japan, he'll take that title.
Courtney Hawkins, Courtney Hawkins would set some freaking records. Like all-time records. If he were to come back to the Atlantic League, I don't know if he will, but we'll
probably won't. Which fun little side fact about that. Apparently, the particular part of MPB that he's in, they do live stream games with on YouTube with an English subcast.
Oh,
yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah, so I think it's the Pacific League, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go over there, you can watch those games. Now, they're at like 12 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning. So, if you want to stay up for that, go for it. But,
the option is there. We're not telling you whether to or whether not to do it. We're just presenting the option and the information if that's a decision you choose to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a choice there. But yeah, as far as Warden goes, I'd agree he's still deserving. Like when I say he's the least or the most borderline so far, I think it's more just because with relievers, they're never really going to have the gaudy numbers because, you're not pitching that often. You're pitching like 1, 2, 3 innings at a clip. And you're only doing that like 2, maybe 3 times a week. So it's hard to really kind of rack up those numbers. Although the reliever ERA thing is kind of the most impressive thing to me, to be a reliever that pitched 300 innings and still be under 3. Like that's pretty damn impressive here. And the saves is pretty good too. I mean, like, over 130 saves in like 6 seasons is pretty impressive. He was a saves leader a handful of times as well. So it's not that he's undeserving. It's just that, as opposed to some of the other guys, especially the next guy that we're going to talk about, it's just the numbers aren't as like eye popping.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But that's the case with most relievers, to be honest with you, as you mentioned. So still think that deserving though, and a guy that was clearly statistically one of the best relievers reliever that spent significant time in the Atlantic League, certainly right up there with the best of them.
Absolutely there. And so with that, we go to the second addition to the team, or I guess now technically the 8th overall, but the second one we will discuss, which came out this past Thursday, and that is Josh Presley. He is the 8th man. He was a first baseman. He played for both Somerset and Sugarland. In the case of Somerset, from 2007 to 2011, and then in Sugarland from 2012 to 2013. A 4-time consecutive All-Star, 2008 through 11. He was also the 2008 Player of the Year, a 2-time Atlantic League champion, both 2008 and 2009. We could see where his prime really was. He finished 5th in home runs all time at 124, 6th all time in RBIs at 505, 8th in extra base hits with 289, and 9th in doubles with 163 of them. He will join the team alongside Mike Guifoyle, Tim Kaine, Glenn Murray, Jeff Nettles, Lincoln Michelson, Ray Neverett, and Jim Ed Warden, as we just mentioned him. Pretty well deserving. I'll let the Somerset guy lead this discussion because I'm sure he's very familiar with Josh Presley.
Well, thank you, Nick. I appreciate you giving me that opportunity because I love Josh Presley. A complete no-brainer on this list, of course. But as the Somerset guy, I do have to say that as far as any independent league, like baseball league or player goes, like team or whatever goes, like my first love was Josh Presley. Like he was the first the
superstar player
that the Indy Ball player that I like watched and like I really became to love. Like, and he was certainly, I was a lot younger back then, a lot younger than I am now. But I think that Josh Presley, just what a great career and so many huge moments in Somerset. The most remarkable part, I think, was just how unbelievably consistent he was for that length of time. I mean, in the time that he played in what was that, like 7 years, I guess, that he was in
About that.
Remarkable consistency Josh Presley showed, and just a guy that always showed up in big games, had so many huge moments. And yeah, certainly a player that is near and dear to my heart, because he is, what a player he was. And I know so many, and plenty of people in Somerset still know him, even though they're not even in the league anymore, not even an Indy Ball team anymore. So very well deserving, great player, and a complete no-brainer for this list, and just a terrific player.
Yeah, I mean, the most impressive part about him is that 2008 season where he hits, 30 home runs, over 100 RBIs.
Yeah.
A batting average of over 350, on base over 440, slugging over 600. I mean, those are just incredible numbers, especially in a time where the Atlantic League really is undisputedly the best of the independent leagues, one where you really do have a lot of high-level former major league talent. I mean, even at this point, Presley was not far removed from being a AAA player.
No, not at all.
Yeah, about 2 years or so, 3 years or so away from it. So he was still a very high-level ball player at that point. So he really kind of owned that and showed that. And it's kind of surprising that after a year like that, I understand he's a 28-year-old, and perhaps more if he played 10 years later, he would have had, but he never really got another chance after that. And it's kind of surprising to me that a guy puts up those kinds of numbers doesn't really even get another look. But, again, I guess it's just more or less a time period where, it's not really viewed the same way as it would become viewed at. So
A guy like that, I think now, with those kind of numbers now, I think the odds of him not getting picked up are pretty slim, unless, I don't know, you're like a 35-year-old first base DH type. But I think a guy like Presley now would definitely be picked up.
Oh yeah, that's just it. I can't see a world where he doesn't at least get picked up and put in AA as let's see what can happen here. And if you continue to do well, I mean, at the very least, I could see maybe getting something there. 28, who knows? But even still, like I said, it's kind of weird to me to never see that. And also keep in mind, too, he played 133 games that year. And it probably would have been, about 140 game season? 146 game?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
those numbers could have even, been more. And that you're right, Nick, because that was the time where the Atlantic League was the talent was definitely there, undisputedly there. Indisputably there. But yeah, I think that while the talent was there, the recognition, I think, at the time was not. But it could have hurt a player like in Presley's ability to get back. But he never let that bother him. He continued to just play every day and just put up monster stat lines after monster stat lines year to year in Somerset. It was incredible.
It really was. And what's kind of even crazier to me is when you go and you look at all the, some of the names from the batting leaders that year, because if you go to Baseball Reference, they have it all. You see a bunch of bolded names, which for those that aren't familiar with Baseball Reference means if your name's bolded, you had time in the major leagues. Of the top 20 in the batting, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Of the top 20 were all major league caliber guys. And Josh Presley comes in fourth. He had the most games played out of anyone in the top 5, actually, besides Ramon Castro. Yes, the Mets' Ramon Castro. He's the only one there that has 100 or more games played. And you just see he's sandwiched with all of these major leaguers. So it's really kind of crazy to think that in the top 10, all but 4 guys had major league service time, and Presley was by far the far and away leader, and he played the third most games, or tied for third most games, out of any of the Atlantic League batters that year. So, kind of insane when you think about it.
Yeah, really insane. And then again, it shows you wonder what could have happened, but you know what would have happened is he wouldn't have put up the monster numbers career wise in the Atlantic League that he did. So for our purposes,
that's
it's more of a
true.
no-brainer on this team.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, and so that is the 8th member of the team. I'm sure we'll get the 9th one next week, and we will continue trugging along as we go through all these names and as we get the team ready for, I guess, the start of the season. So on that note, we have 2 other really minor things left, and then we'll be done for the week. Yeah, it's a short week, but we warned you a half hour ago that it would be. Empire League has a tryout. It's kind of a multi-league tryout because there are going to be coaches from other leagues in attendance, but it is mainly for the Empire League. April 5th and 6th at People's Bank Park, so about 2 weeks from now. If you're interested in playing, go over there. We're adding it to the tryout list. We have a tryout list on the website, by the way, indyballreport.com. Go to the articles tab. We're trying to keep it up to date. It's essentially, we throw a little blurb about each tryout in there and give you the basic information on it, and then a link to the registration page. So it kind of keeps everything in one place, makes it kind of easy, makes it a good jumping off point if you're looking to get into independent league ball. So there's that for the Empire tryout. And then we have some Maverick League news. I don't think you have anything really to say about tryout because tryout, but if you do, go for it, Will.
I think the only thing as far as that I would mention is that, while the tryouts for the Empire League, I think there's probably a good chance Mark Mason will be there. So I think it'll be interesting to see how many guys from who start the year with the Empire State Grays and the Frontier League have how many players come from this tryout.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably going to be a couple. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot, but there's probably going to be a couple. So,
yeah,
it's still the Empire League at the end of the day. So, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yep. But it is something that is the Maverick League or Mavericks League.
So smooth.
Yeah.
Never. I guarantee you the listeners didn't see that one comment. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, they probably didn't expect to hear any Mavericks League news this week, to be quite honest with you, because, we don't really ever talk about it, but we've mentioned it like 3 or 4 times in the past month, which is honestly probably a record for this show mentioning the Mavericks League. Mainly because I still wrote Maverick League down in my notes.
That's exactly what I was just going to mention, Nick, that I was today years old when I found out that it's called the Mavericks League, not the Maverick League. I thought it was the Maverick League for a solid 2 years, and I've now just learned today that it is actually, I'm just looking at their website and I was like, does that say Mavericks? I'm like, wait, so it's the Mavericks League, not the Maverick League, which I did not know until literally today.
Yeah, because you think just Maverick as like an adjective would describe the league, and so it would work better as opposed to going Mavericks, which would be a noun. So, it just doesn't make sense. Plus, one of the teams is called the Mavericks. So you would think, you're not going to name the league and the team the same thing, but I guess that's not quite the case here. But, in case you have forgotten about the Mavericks League, we wouldn't blame you because, quite frankly, sometimes we do. There are 4 teams in this league, all based out of Salem, Oregon. You got the Camceros, Volcanoes, Senators, and Mavericks. Those are the 4 teams, all play on the same thing, kind of like a Western version of the USPBL, all out of a defunct MILB teams operation. Mainly just trying to keep pro ball in the area. So applaud them for that, even if they're probably better off just joining the Pioneer League, but, it is what they've decided to do. In any case, they announced their managers, Aaron Johnson, Tony Torquato, Corey Paul, and Scott Binder. Those are all the guys. 2 of them are brand new. One of them is just new to the league. The other ones have all been in the league for the past 3 years, but have varying levels of manager experience. We got it up on the website. Their website that is linked to it will be in the show notes, which is on our website. And, essentially they all have some connection to the area. They all have some connection to each of these teams. We could go into detail on it, but quite frankly put, none of these guys are particularly well-known names. I guess Corey Paul is probably the closest to well-known. But those are your guys.
Mavericks League.
Yeah.
Mavericks League.
Yeah. I don't think you have anything really. Do you have anything really to say? Or because I don't have anything. So
I guess just woo Mavericks League.
we're very insightful when it comes to the Mavericks League. So
we are.
It's just like, I wish I could talk about it more, but I really just don't have a strong opinion on any of this one way or the other.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that just about does it for us this week. Less than 40 minutes because it is a short week. Those will happen. And, yeah. So, I guess we just do plugs and then we get out of here and we go on with the rest of our day. So if you want to follow the show, you can do so on Twitter at Indy Ball Pod. You can do so on Instagram at Indy Ball Report or at ALPB_news. Website's got links to everything. It also got the tryout thing. There's some other stuff there too you can check out. That's IndyBallReport.com. And the show is wherever you can find it. TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, all that. So rate, review if you can, and subscribe to the show. Anything else left to get to? Anything else?
The only thing I want to add, and I know Nick Firestone didn't watch it because he's still anti-DH, but yes. The World Baseball Classic was incredible, and it was so much fun from the beginning of Pool A to the championship game, just an unbelievable game between Japan and the U.S. And just bravo to all the athletes, all the Indy ballers as well who participated. There were lots of them that were in the WBC as well, and it was just really cool to see. As the atmospheres were unbelievable, the fans were unbelievable as well, and you could see how hard those players were playing for their countries, and it was just really cool. I can't wait for it to come back in 3 years in 2026, and I think with how much of a success it was this year, and I think there's going to be more talent than ever seen in the WBC, where literally it becomes the norm to play as opposed not to play. So was really entertained. Getting playoff intensity like baseball in March was a dream, and it was really cool to watch. And Shohei Ohtani is an absolute freak show. That's the only other thing I have left to add. Yeah, see,
you're right. I didn't really watch any of it. From what I did, I also just didn't have any motivation to watch. I just, quite frankly, didn't care. It just doesn't appeal to me. So, it's great. I don't really typically care about best on best, world tournament thing. I care more about league play. So, I get the appeal of it, but at the same time, I was also thinking, when I saw, Altuve break his hand, Diaz mess up his knee, I was thinking, man, if I was a fan of either one of those teams, I'd be livid at this thing.
But they can get hurt in spring training games too, though.
But see, I always see that as an argument, but when I hear that, I go, yeah, but that's working for the team as opposed to doing some freelancing. That's major different.
Well, it's their salaries are still covered by insurance, so the teams like the Mets won't have to pay Diaz.
I mean, I don't really care about them having to pay. It's not coming out of my pocket. I care about my team being without their superstar player.
Yeah, but why is that the WBC's fault?
Because presumably, with the case of Diaz, I mean, that's a freak thing. It could happen in spring training or not. In the case of Altuve, he got hit with a pitch. Presumably, if it was a spring training game, he would have been worked in differently, and that particular pitch would not have hit him. So I would put it on him for that.
I mean, but you could face a guy who loses a fastball, some minor leaguer who loses a fastball in a spring training game too.
I mean, you could, but it doesn't normally happen. And people point to all these other injuries that happen during spring training. It's yeah, but at least I could say, well, it was during the course of, working with the team, doing something that was team related. Do I really care at the end of the day if Venezuela or the U.S. or Puerto Rico or any particular team wins this event? No, I do not. I do not care. I do not have anything invested in it. I have not cared about any of it. And it's an event that's existed since 2006. So yeah. I don't really particularly care about an event that, quite frankly, I'm older then. So, you know, it doesn't have that much appeal to me. Like, I get it for the players. I understand. And like people saying, oh, they're meaningless games. It's like, not particularly. The players care about it. So that means it has meaning. Plus, there are some people that really like, you know, country on country, best on best. And for those people, yeah, like it has meaning. Where it has no meaning is for people that are Major League Baseball fans. If you're just an MLB fan, or you're just a fan of like league play, then yeah, they're meaningless to you. And you're annoyed when one of your players gets hurt in non-league play or non-league related activities. So like, that's just the position I would take. Like, I'm not going to call them meaningless because they're not, but like, at the same time, they don't have any meaning to me.
I hard disagree because I care about it and it's fun.
Exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like, I get it. And like, if you care about it, then great. But like, for me, I just don't, you know, like, I'm in the same boat when it comes to hockey and stuff. Like, the minute I turned against the Olympics was when, what was it, Tavares or was it Stamkos that slammed into that post and then broke his leg?
Oh, yeah. Which one was that?
I forget, because Stamkos also broke his leg like that. I can't remember if he did that with Tampa or with Team Canada, though. I'm almost 100% positive it's Tavares, but I remember Stamkos having something similar around the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, when Tavares did that in the end of the Islander season, I was kind of happy because Islander season, but I liked Tavares as a player, so I didn't like seeing him go down like that. But when I saw that, I was like, ooh, I don't know about this. And also Hasek doing the same thing, playing with an injured groin, and then messing it up further, playing for the Czech Republic. That wasn't great either. But, you know, when I saw that, I was like, I have a player too that's kind of in the same boat that's playing for his national team. And if he gets hurt, our season's just dead in the water. So, you know, maybe let's not do these things.
But like no one says that for like European soccer with national teams.
Well, you got to understand something. I just don't care about European soccer.
No, I know that.
Then the culture's different. There's a much different type of culture around that. Because for a lot of these European nations, that is kind of the national game. That is like the sport. And I mean, we could go back and forth on it. Like baseball's not that anymore.
What about hockey does?
For Canada, yeah, and that's where you get allowed to push. But like
Canada, Russia.
I mean, like I feel like Russia just, they kind of live on the, we know we're better than, even though they're not really, just because they had the run of the Soviet period. So, you know, I just, like, there's some push to it, but I just don't, you know, it's a different kind of dynamic.
Okay. Well, agree to disagree. But.
Yeah. It's just like I said, I understand the appeal of it and I get why people like it. And I'm not going to say like, you know, it shouldn't exist because a lot of people like it. It's just for me personally, I get very nervous and I cringe at it because like for me, like I'll just use hockey for an example because that's the sport that I probably care the most about. I could give a damn if the U.S. wins a gold medal. It'd be all right. It'd be nice. I'd be like, oh, great, we won a thing. But I care way more about the Rangers winning a cup. I care infinitely more about that. So if you're going to tell me that I have to roll the dice on losing, like, say, Adam Fox, a key component of the Ranger defense and the team as a whole, so they can go win a gold medal as opposed to focus on winning a cup, hell no, take that risk out. Do not, I don't want him going. I don't want any of my players going. Same thing with the All-Star game. Like, people have gotten hurt in that thing too before. That's why whenever they put the fan votes up, I vote in players of other teams. I never vote for any Rangers in that because I don't want them going. Plus, I don't think they really want to go either, but that's besides the point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, no one is saying that, at least from my perspective too, that I care. I don't know, like I'll use the Red Sox for example. Like I was honestly more cheering for the Red Sox players as well in that. So I don't know. That's how I view it at least. But your point is well taken. But and I get it if you're like, you know, someone who, I can see that point if somebody doesn't really care about, you know, winning any sort of gold medal for their country. Yeah, then it is a risk. But then again, every player who is in one of these, like no one's forced to do it.
Oh yeah, like that's the thing. Like for any player that's competing in it, it obviously means a lot to him. I mean, like just in the Indy Ball realm, like if Van Steensel I mean, he struck out Ohtani, and that's something he's always going to have. So, like, that alone will make it worthwhile for a lot of players, especially for guys that are playing on, Team Italy, Team Czech Republic, Team Australia, these kinds of teams where you're not really getting a chock full of major leaguers. It means a lot to them. That is very realistically the highlight of their baseball career, because they get to play on a stage that's pretty damn close to major league talent, because you have a lot of major league talent there. So, for them, it's not meaningless, and I get it. I'm in the minority opinion on it. I totally get it, and I understand it, but like, for me, I get real spooked about it, and I don't care about international play pretty much at all. So when we look at it from that lens, it's like, okay, I got an international tournament I don't care about that uses players versus league play that I care about heavily, and they're using my guys and injuries happen. It's like, okay, I just hope nobody gets hurt. Like, that's kind of my thing. And then when you see, like, okay, they truly care, there's two ways of looking at it. One, like, oh, this is great baseball, which it is. And the other way of, oh God, they're going to get hurt doing this. And then there goes the World Series bid.
I get it. I get it. I just like I'm obliged to watch, like, as well as like a general baseball fan for as well as on top of the Red Sox. And certainly there's certain guys who probably shouldn't go. Like Jacob deGrom should not pitch in this thing. No,
he pitched for Texas now. He should go pitch in it.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, because he's injury prone.
Should not pitch in this thing.
Yeah,
and I know that happens to be a Red Sox, but I think the best on best stuff was very fun from my perspective, and you're certainly rooting for don't nobody get hurt. That is a part of it as well, but I think the pros outweigh the cons from what I've seen.
Which I just had an interesting thought, because I think it could work, and I think there's going to be at least one Indy Ball league, I guess, that's going to take this and run with it. And this actually kind of fits the original point of this, which is just anything we forgot we got to toss in, which is, do you think one league, either this year or next year, or they're going to try and make it a thing going forward, is going to go for a, like, North America or Team USA versus the world type gimmick at their All-Star game?
That's a good question.
Because I remember the NHL doing this in the early aughts, where they have like Team North America versus Team World. And I feel like you could do that in Indy Ball. It's a little bit tougher because there's a lot more American players as opposed to, say, Latin players or international players as a whole. It's a bit tougher, but there's still plenty on both fronts where you could put together a very competitive team on each side. Now, a matter of getting them to where they're playing and the, logistics of it, that's another story entirely. But I feel like it's a lot easier of a sell, in a way. If we're going to do like kind of a gimmicky thing, it's probably the easiest of them to sell.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
I don't, to me, the reason why I would say no at the moment is just looking at, I don't know if they would be able to get like teams that make sense on both sides, because there are a lot more American players in independent league baseball. I don't know. I don't know if the logistics would allow for it now, but I think if you wanted to take all of that out and assume that, okay, the idea of we're going to have 2 even rosters is not a problem, then I would do it. But I don't know 100%, I guess, as far as would they be able to pull it off like that. So I don't know. I just had like probably one of my dumbest harebrained schemes. And this is why we do this segment, by the way, because every once in a while we get a good idea that pops up in it. And this is one that I think is a stupid idea, but I think it's fun and interesting. So I'm going to say it anyway, which is, what if, and I know this is going to sound bad, but they normally do the 2 days for the things. They do like their skills competition, at least in the, I guess both kind of do it with home run derbies and stuff, but they do that day 1 and they do the actual game day 2, right? Yeah, I think.
Yeah. But what my suggestion here is, you kind of do it like how the NHL's done their kind of mini all-star tournament, where we reduce the size of the rosters down to, say, like, I don't know, go 10 or 11 batters and go about 4 or 5 pitchers on it. So we say make them about 15-man teams, and we go with 3 teams of it. You go 1 international team, 1 U.S. East, and 1 U.S. West. So you could either go with players that are from the eastern part of the country or from the western part of the country, or their team's more eastern-based versus western-based, whichever, doesn't really matter. And they play a series of like mini tournament games, say a 5 or 6 inning game. Keep it quick, keep it moving, something like that. And they play each other, and basically you have a round robin stage. You use total runs or run differential as a tiebreaker. So that way we don't have to worry about, extra innings or anything like that. Or you could send it to a home run derby or something like that for a tiebreaker. Figure it out however you want to do it. And then have a full 9 inning game between the 2 remaining teams, so let's say U.S. East and International were the top 2 teams, have them play a full 9 inning game the following day and have that be your all-star event.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Because
if you can fill those teams with a somewhat evenly, I'm just worried about Atlantic Leaguers is more of them are on the East Coast.
Yeah. So that's,
if you can ensure the teams are going to be even, I'm all for that.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Because I think it's an interesting proposal because it gives something else for that event. Because you figure this, you want to have people there, but you don't want it to run on too long. So if you figure you can get, say, a 5 inning game with all the current rules and keep the clock moving and stuff like that. You can even steal from Banana Ball, which has an actual clock on the game. You could just toss say an hour or a 90-minute clock on it and just have them play like that and make it keep running. So even if you want to say an hour per game, what's it going to wind up being? Each team has to play each other. So 1, 2, 3. What is that going to wind up being about? It's not going to be a 9-hour thing, right? If they each have to. All right. Yeah. Okay. So maybe you got to figure out a way for it to be kind of quicker. So that's obviously the downside with it. It doesn't work as well as opposed to in a clock sports. Maybe even drop it down to 3 innings and try to put something together like that. Figuring it out is a bit difficult, but if you can keep it to say about 3 hours, you could either nix the skills competition or make that part of something else and then have an event the following day. And I think it's a bit different, it's a bit interesting, and maybe something you could sell a little bit better. So I just think it's an interesting thing. I do agree with the concern of make sure they're even, but I feel like there's a way you can manage to make it even, especially if you're going with states guys are from. You got to be concerned about the Florida people, but there's going to be plenty of guys from California and the Midwest. Just kind of get creative with the line as to where it is. Or, you could even just do it even simpler and go team North and team South. And then the town's probably a little bit more evenly distributed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think if you did North-South, that'd be definitely more evenly distributed. Well, actually, I don't know. It'd probably be southern dominant, but I don't know. It's interesting. It's food for thought.
Yeah, if you really want to get crazy with it, you could even just have 2 captains, one that's from a firmly different area than the other, and let them kind of draft states. Now that's kind of really.
You could do a fantasy draft.
Fantasy draft could work too. Yeah, honestly, the fantasy draft may not be bad, especially if it's one of those locations which nobody wants to go to or can get to. Yeah. That way, it kind of helps out a little bit more. But yeah, my whole thought process with the 3 teams was just it's a little bit easier because you don't have to fill out a full roster of players. You just need about 36 guys as opposed to 40 or 45 or 48 guys. You can go ahead and get away with having 10, 12 guys if you really wanted to. But,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just an idea I thought of. So I think that just about does it for us this week. You got some extra content at the very end. So those that stuck around, you got to hear some harebrained schemes. So that's good for you. And hopefully next time we'll have some more of those for you. But until then, don't forget to play ball.